The first thing I felt wasn't pain. It was disbelief. My son, my own blood, had just struck me across the face because I refused to give him my retirement savings. I stood there, my nose bleeding onto the napkin I'd stitched decades ago, realizing this wasn't my son anymore. 15 minutes later, he'd understand exactly what that meant. But let me start from the beginning, because you need to understand how deep this betrayal cuts. You need to understand what it feels like when the child you carried for 9 months, the baby you nursed through countless sleepless nights, the little boy you taught to ride a bike and helped with homework, looks you dead in the eye and sees nothing but dollar signs. It was a Sunday evening in March. I'd been hosting these family dinners for 37 years, ever since my husband David and I bought this ranch. Even after David passed 5 years ago, I kept the tradition alive. Every Sunday at 6, the dining room table would be set with my grandmother's china, the good silverware polished until it gleamed, fresh flowers from my garden arranged in the crystal vase David gave me for our 20th anniversary. I used to love these dinners. They were the highlight of my week. But lately, they'd become something else entirely. A performance I had to endure, watching my son Marcus and his wife Jennifer treat my home like some kind of charity case they were graciously visiting. The way they'd walk through my door without knocking, dump their designer handbags on my antique table, and immediately start critiquing everything from the temperature to the meal I'd spent hours preparing. That particular Sunday, I'd made Marcus's favorite, pot roast with all the fixings, just like I used to when he was growing up and would come home from football practice starving and covered in mud. I remember standing in the kitchen that afternoon, my arthritic hands working the seasoning into the meat, thinking maybe this time would be different. Maybe this time my son would look at me the way he used to, with love instead of calculation. I was such a fool. They arrived 20 minutes late, as usual. No apology, no acknowledgement that I'd been standing at the window watching for their headlights. Jennifer swept in wearing a coat that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, her heels clicking against my hardwood floors like accusations. Marcus followed behind her, already on his phone, barely grunting a hello in my direction. "Sorry we're late, Mom," he said without looking up from his screen. Traffic was a nightmare. But I knew that wasn't true. I'd driven that same route from their subdivision earlier that week. There was no traffic at 6:30 on a Sunday evening. They were late because they didn't respect my time. They were late because in their minds, I had nothing better to do than wait for them. We sat down to dinner, and for the first few minutes, everything seemed normal. Jennifer complimented the roast, though I noticed she barely touched it, and Marcus asked about my garden. Surface-level conversation, the kind you have with strangers at a cocktail party, not with family around your own table. But then I made the mistake of mentioning that I'd been thinking about selling the ranch. The change in the room was instant. Jennifer's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Marcus finally looked up from his phone, his eyes sharp and focused for the first time all evening. The air itself seemed to thicken, charged with a greed so palpable I could taste it. "Selling?" Jennifer asked, and I swear I could see dollar signs reflecting in her pupils. "But Mom, this place has been in the family for decades." She'd never called it family before. She'd never shown any interest in the history of this place, in the stories these walls could tell. When David was alive, she used to complain about having to drive out here, about how rustic everything was, how she couldn't get a good cell signal. Now suddenly it was family. Well, I said carefully, because even then I knew something was shifting, I'm getting older, and this place is becoming too much for me to maintain. I was thinking about downsizing to something smaller, maybe closer to town. Marcus leaned forward, and I saw something in his face that made my stomach clench. It was the same expression he'd worn as a child when he'd broken something valuable and was trying to figure out how to avoid getting in trouble. "What would you do with the money?" he asked, his tone casual, but his eyes predatory. I should have lied. I should have said I was donating it all to charity or burning it in the backyard. Instead, I told the truth. Pay off my medical bills from last year's surgery. Maybe take that trip to Ireland I've been dreaming about since your father died. Set aside something for my final years so I'm not a burden on anyone. The word burden hung in the air like a curse. I watched Jennifer's face transform, watched her mind working behind those calculating eyes. She exchanged a look with Marcus, one of those married couple communications that happens without words. "You know, Mom," Marcus said, setting down his fork and putting on what I now recognize was his sales voice, "I've been thinking about expanding the business. We could really use some capital investment." My heart started pounding, but not from excitement. From dread. Because I knew what was coming next, and I knew there was no graceful way to avoid it. "The construction company has been doing really well," he continued, his voice getting warmer, more persuasive. "Jennifer's been helping with the books, and we've identified some incredible opportunities for growth. But we need more capital to really take advantage of them." Jennifer nodded enthusiastically, jumping in like they'd rehearsed this. "The potential returns are enormous, Mom. We're talking about tripling our revenue within 2 years." I looked at my son, really looked at him, and tried to find the little boy who used to help me bake cookies every Christmas, who would bring me wildflowers he'd picked on his way home from school. But that little boy was gone, replaced by this stranger who saw his mother's life savings as his personal opportunity fund. "That sounds wonderful, honey," I said slowly, "but I'm not in a position to invest right now. These medical bills are substantial, and at my age, I need to be conservative with my finances." The temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. Marcus's jaw tightened, and Jennifer's smile turned plastic and sharp. "Conservative?" Jennifer laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Mom, you're 62, not 92. You've got years ahead of you. And what better way to spend those years than knowing you've helped your family build something amazing?" Marcus added, "This isn't just an investment, Mom. This is a chance to be part of something bigger." I felt the walls closing in. They weren't asking anymore. They were pressuring. The loving family dinner had become a business meeting, and I was the unwilling client being pitched a deal I didn't want. "I understand the opportunity sounds exciting," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but my answer is no. "I need that money for my own security." The silence that followed was deafening. I watched my son's face cycle through confusion, frustration, and finally anger. Jennifer wasn't even trying to hide her disappointment anymore. "Your own security?" Marcus's voice was getting louder. "Mom, we're your family. We're your security." But that was the problem, wasn't it? If they were my security, why did I feel so terrified sitting at my own dinner table? "You can't take it with you anyway," Jennifer said, her mask finally slipping completely. "I mean, let's be realistic here. You're not getting any younger." The cruelty of that statement hit me like a physical blow. This woman, who had never worked a day in her life, who lived off the business my son had built with money from his divorce settlement, was telling me I was too old to deserve financial security. "Jennifer," I said quietly, "I think you should watch your tone." She laughed, actually laughed, at me. "My tone? We're trying to help you make a smart financial decision, and you're worried about my tone." Marcus reached across the table and grabbed my hand, his grip just a little too tight. "Mom, listen to me. This is a sure thing. You'd get your money back plus returns within 18 months. And in the meantime, you'd still have this house, you'd still have everything you need." I pulled my hand away. "And what if it's not a sure thing? What if something goes wrong and I lose everything?" "Nothing's going to go wrong," he said, but his voice had an edge to it now. "You don't trust me. That's what this is really about, isn't it? Your own son offers you an incredible opportunity, and you don't trust me enough to take it." That's when I made my second mistake of the evening. I told him the truth. "Marcus, honey, I love you more than my own life. But trusting you with my money and trusting your business judgment are two different things. You've had 3 failed businesses in the last 10 years. You lost your first house because you overextended yourself. I can't risk my retirement on another one of your ventures." The words were out before I could stop them, hanging in the air like toxic smoke. I watched my son's face change, watched 37 years of motherhood crumble in the space of a heartbeat. "Another one of my ventures?" His voice was deadly quiet now. "Is that what you think of me? Is that really what you think of your own son? I tried to backtrack, tried to soften the blow, but it was too late. Honey, I didn't mean. No, you were perfectly clear. He stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. My own mother thinks I'm a failure. Jennifer was nodding along, adding fuel to the fire. This is exactly what I was afraid of. She's never supported your dreams, Marcus. She's never believed in you. That's not true, I said, standing up myself now, my heart racing. I've supported you through everything. Every failure, every setback, every time you needed to start over. I've been there. Supported me? Marcus was pacing now, his voice getting louder with each word. You call lending me money and then reminding me about it every chance you get support? You call keeping a mental tally of every mistake I've ever made support? I have never. You just did. You just listed every business failure I've had like you've been keeping score. The rational part of my brain knew I should de-escalate, should apologize and try to calm things down. But 37 years of watching my son blame everyone else for his problems, 37 years of being his emotional punching bag every time life didn't go his way, finally broke something inside me. Maybe I have been keeping score, I said, my voice shaking with anger I'd been suppressing for years. Maybe I've been watching you make the same mistakes over and over again and wondering when you're going to learn from them instead of asking me to pay for them. The room went dead silent. Jennifer's mouth was hanging open. Marcus looked like I'd slapped him across the face. I can't believe you just said that, he whispered. Well, I did. And while we're being honest, let me tell you something else. I worked 2 jobs for 15 years to put you through college. I took out a second mortgage on this house to help you start your first business. I've bailed you out of more financial disasters than I can count. And not once, not once. Have you ever thanked me or acknowledged what those sacrifices cost me? I was crying now, years of resentment and disappointment pouring out of me like blood from a wound. Instead, you show up here every Sunday, barely speak to me, treat my home like a restaurant, and then have the audacity to demand my retirement savings like I owe them to you. Like 37 years of being your mother means I don't deserve to feel secure in my old age. Marcus was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not hurt, not anger, but something colder. Something that made my blood freeze in my veins. You know what, Mom? His voice was eerily calm now. You're right. You've given me a lot over the years. But you know what you've never given me? Respect. Belief. Confidence that I could succeed without you holding my hand. That's not. And now I understand why. Because you don't see me as a successful businessman. You see me as your screw-up son who can't do anything right. Well, let me tell you something. I've built a $1 million company. I have clients who respect me, who trust me with their projects, who believe in my vision. But my own mother thinks I'm a failure. Jennifer stood up and moved to stand beside him, a united front against me. Maybe it's time you started treating your son with the respect he deserves. He's offering you an incredible opportunity here. I don't want the opportunity, I said firmly. I want to sell this house, pay my bills, and live quietly for whatever years I have left. That's my choice to make. Your choice. Marcus laughed bitterly. You talk about choices like you're some independent woman who built all this herself. But let me remind you of something, Mom. Dad built this company. Dad bought this house. Dad left you comfortable. You didn't earn any of this. The words hit me like a knife between the ribs. Because there was just enough truth in them to make them devastating. David had been the primary breadwinner. David had made the down payment on the house. David had built the nest egg that was keeping me afloat now. But what Marcus was conveniently forgetting was that I'd been the one who kept the books for David's business. I'd been the one who managed the household finances, who found ways to stretch every dollar, who worked part-time while raising Marcus and still managed to keep our budget in the black. I'd been the one who nursed David through his final illness, who held his hand while he died, who had been managing his legacy for the past 5 years. How dare you, I whispered, my voice shaking with rage. How dare you diminish what I contributed to this family? I'm not diminishing anything. I'm just pointing out that you didn't build this empire on your own. And now you're sitting on a pile of money that could actually do some good, could actually grow and benefit the whole family, and you're too selfish to see beyond your own fear. Selfish. The word came out as a shriek. Selfish. Yes, selfish. You're an old woman sitting alone in a house that's too big for you, hoarding money you can't possibly spend in your lifetime, while your son, your only child, is asking for help to build something meaningful. That's when Jennifer decided to twist the knife. Honestly, Mom, what are you planning to do with all that money? You don't travel. You don't buy anything nice for yourself. You're just going to sit here counting it until you die, and then what? It goes to some charity instead of staying in the family where it belongs. The entitlement in her voice, the casual cruelty of her words, made me see red. This woman who had contributed nothing to our family, who had married my son after his first wife, the mother of his children had been pushed aside, was telling me how to spend money I'd helped earn. That money doesn't belong to you, I said, my voice deadly quiet. It doesn't belong to Marcus. It belongs to me. I helped earn it, I watched my husband die from the stress of earning it, and I'll decide what happens to it. Even if that means letting your only son struggle while you sit on enough money to change his life? Marcus demanded. You're not struggling. I shouted, finally losing the last of my composure. You live in a 4,000 square foot house. You drive a BMW. Your wife doesn't work. You take vacations to Europe twice a year. Don't you dare stand in my dining room and tell me you're struggling. That's not the point. That's exactly the point. You don't need my money. You want my money. There's a difference, and the fact that you can't see it tells me everything I need to know about who you've become. Marcus stepped closer to me, his face red with anger. Who I've become. Who I've become. Let me tell you who you've become, Mom. You've become a bitter, lonely old woman who would rather count money than help her own family. Each word was designed to hurt, and they did. Because there was enough truth in them to make them stick. I was lonely. I was getting old. And maybe I was bitter, though I thought I had good reason to be. You know what I think? Jennifer chimed in, her voice venomous. I think you're jealous. I think you're jealous that Marcus has built something successful, something that doesn't depend on you, and you can't stand it. That's ridiculous. Is it? You've spent his whole adult life making him feel guilty for every mistake, making him come crawling back to you every time he needed help. And now that he doesn't need you anymore, now that he's offering you a partnership instead of asking for a handout, you can't handle it. The psychological warfare was expertly deployed. They were attacking not just my decision, but my character, my motivations, my worth as a mother. They were making me question everything I thought I knew about my relationship with my son. And for a moment, it worked. For a moment, I wondered if I was being selfish. If I was holding onto money out of fear or spite instead of love. But then Marcus said the words that changed everything. You know what, Mom? Fine. Keep your precious money. Sit here alone in this house, counting your dollars like some kind of miser. But don't expect me to keep coming around just to watch you waste away. The threat was clear. Give us the money or lose your son forever. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. A man who would emotionally blackmail his own mother to get what he wanted. A man who had brought his wife into my home to gang up on me, to make me feel small and scared and alone. Are you threatening me? I asked quietly. I'm being realistic. I'm a busy man, Mom. I have a business to run, a life to live. If you're not going to be part of our future, then maybe we need to accept that and move on. Jennifer nodded along like this was perfectly reasonable. It's just practical, Mom. Family relationships should be mutually beneficial. Mutually beneficial. Like I was a business partner instead of the woman who had given birth to him, raised him, sacrificed for him. Get out, I said quietly. What? I said get out. Both of you. Get out of my house. Marcus's face twisted with rage. Are you serious right now? You're kicking us out because we dared to suggest that family money should stay in the family. I'm kicking you out because you just threatened to cut me out of your life if I don't give you my retirement savings. I'm kicking you out because you brought your wife into my home to help you bully me. I'm kicking you out because you've made it clear that the only value I have to you is financial. I was shaking now, adrenaline and heartbreak coursing through my system like poison. You don't want a mother. You want an ATM. And I refuse to be that for you anymore. Marcus stepped closer, his face inches from mine. I could smell the wine on his breath, see the fury in his eyes. You're making a huge mistake, Mom. A huge mistake. We're your family. We're all you have. And you're throwing us away over money. No, I said, my voice growing stronger. You're throwing me away over money. I'm just finally seeing it clearly. That's when he lost control completely. You selfish, bitter old bitch, he screamed, spittle flying from his mouth. You'd rather die alone than help your own son. You'd rather take your money to the grave than see your family succeed. Marcus. I gasped, shocked by the venom in his voice. No, I'm done pretending. I'm done tiptoeing around your feelings. You want to know the truth? You're a miserable woman who has nothing in her life except money, and you're too much of a coward to do anything meaningful with it. Stop it, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. You know what Dad used to say about you? He used to say you were small. Small dreams, small thinking, small heart. And he was right. You're small. You're a small, frightened woman who's too scared to take any risks, too scared to really live. Each word was like a physical blow. The idea that David, my David, had said those things about me was almost too much to bear. That's not true, I sobbed. Isn't it? When was the last time you did something brave? When was the last time you took a chance on anything? You've been hiding in this house since Dad died, too scared to really engage with life, and now you're too scared to invest in your own son's future. Jennifer was nodding along, feeding off the cruelty like a vampire. Marcus is right. You're wasting your life, and you're wasting our time. We could have been partners. We could have built something amazing together. But instead, you choose to be a victim. I was crying so hard I could barely speak. But somehow I managed to whisper, please leave. Please just leave. Oh, we're leaving, Marcus snarled. But don't think this is over. Don't think you can just dismiss us like we're nothing. He turned to go, and I thought maybe it was over. Maybe they would just leave and we could all try to heal from this disaster later. But then he turned back around, his face twisted with rage, and said the words that destroyed everything. You'll die soon anyway, Mom. What's the point of hoarding money you can't take with you? The casual cruelty of it, the dismissal of my life as something that was already over, broke the last piece of my heart that was still intact. And that's when I made my final mistake of the evening. Get out, I said, my voice shaking with rage. Get out now, and don't you ever come back. Fine, he screamed. But you remember this, Mom. You remember that you chose money over family. You remember that when you're dying alone in this house, with nobody who cares about you. I'll remember that my son cared more about my bank account than my life, I shot back. And that's when he hit me. It wasn't a slap. It was a closed fist punch, delivered with all the force of his rage and disappointment. It caught me square across the face, spinning me around and sending me crashing into the dining room table. The impact knocked over the crystal vase, David's anniversary gift, and it shattered on the hardwood floor. Blood from my nose dripped onto the white tablecloth, the one I'd embroidered with tiny roses during the long months when David was dying. I lay there for a moment, stunned. Not just by the physical pain, but by the impossible reality of what had just happened. My son, my baby, had hit me, had struck his own mother in a rage over money. I could hear Jennifer gasping, hear Marcus breathing hard like he'd just run a marathon. But nobody spoke. Nobody moved to help me up. Nobody apologized. I pulled myself upright, using the table for support. My nose was definitely broken, blood streaming down my face. But I didn't cry out. I didn't scream or beg or collapse in tears. Instead, I looked at my son with perfect clarity for the first time in years. That, I said quietly, was your last mistake. Something in my voice must have penetrated his rage, because I saw a flicker of uncertainty cross his face. Jennifer grabbed his arm, whispering urgently in his ear. Mom, he started. No, I said, holding up a bloody hand. You don't get to talk anymore. You just crossed a line that can never be uncrossed. I walked calmly to the bathroom, leaving them standing in my dining room surrounded by broken crystal and spilled blood. I cleaned my face with a towel that had been a wedding gift 40 years ago, and then I did something they weren't expecting. I called the police. But first, I called my lawyer. And then I called my private investigator. Because what Marcus and Jennifer didn't know, what they couldn't have known, was that for the past 3 months, I'd been documenting everything. Every cruel comment, every manipulation, every threat. Every time they'd gone through my papers while I was making dinner. Every conversation they thought I couldn't hear. The hidden cameras I'd installed after catching Marcus rifling through my desk had captured everything, including the assault that had just occurred. You see, I wasn't the naive, helpless old woman they thought I was. When you've been married to a businessman for 37 years, when you've helped run a company and manage finances, and navigate the complexities of human nature, you learn a few things. And one of the things I'd learned was that people will eventually show you exactly who they are if you give them enough rope. Marcus and Jennifer had been hanging themselves for months. Tonight, they'd finally finished the job. I walked back into the dining room, where they were standing in shocked silence. Marcus looked like he was about to be sick. Jennifer was staring at the blood on the tablecloth like she couldn't quite believe what had happened. Sit down, I said calmly. Both of you. They exchanged a look, but they sat. I want to show you something, I said, opening my laptop on the table. I think you'll find it very interesting. I clicked play on the first video. It showed Marcus and Jennifer in this very room 3 weeks ago, going through my desk drawers while I was in the kitchen preparing dinner. The audio was crystal clear. She's got to have the bank statements in here somewhere, Jennifer's voice said from the speakers. Keep looking, Marcus replied. I need to know exactly how much we're dealing with. Found them. Jesus Christ, Marcus. She's sitting on over $800,000. That's not including the house. Or the land. We're talking about close to $2 million total. All of which should be ours anyway. I mean, what's she going to do with it? Buy more ugly furniture. They watched themselves in horrified silence as the video continued. You know what I think? Jennifer's recorded voice said. I think we need to start planning for the inevitable. She's not getting any younger. What do you mean? I mean, accidents happen, Marcus. Old people fall downstairs. They forget to turn off the gas. They get confused about their medications. Jennifer, what are you saying? I'm saying we shouldn't wait for nature to take its course. We should be more proactive. The blood drained from Marcus's face as he watched himself nod slowly on the screen. How proactive? His recorded voice asked. Let's just say that $800,000 is a lot of money to waste on an old woman who's already lived her life. I paused the video and looked at them both. Jennifer was white as a sheet. Marcus looked like he was going to vomit. That's conspiracy to commit murder, I said conversationally. Just in case you were wondering. Mom, we weren't serious, Marcus started. Oh, but you were. Would you like to see the video from last week, where you discussed which insurance companies pay out quickly for accidental deaths? Or maybe the one from yesterday, where Jennifer looked up the schedule for my heart medication. Jennifer made a choking sound. Marcus just stared at me in horror. You see, children, I may be old, but I'm not stupid. And I've been watching you both very carefully for quite some time now. I clicked to another video file. This one is from today. Should we watch the part where you threatened to abandon me if I didn't give you my money? Or should we skip ahead to the part where my son punched his 62-year-old mother in the face? The police are already on their way, I continued, my voice perfectly calm. As is my lawyer. And my private investigator, who has been documenting your activities for the past 3 months. Marcus found his voice. You can't be serious. We're family. No, I said, standing up slowly. Family doesn't plot each other's murder. Family doesn't steal from each other. And family certainly doesn't assault each other over money. I walked to the window and looked out at the driveway. Here they come now. Red and blue lights were flashing through the trees as the police cars made their way up my long driveway. You plan my death for a house you'll never live in, I said, turning back to face them. And the best part? This house was never yours to inherit anyway. The confusion on their faces would have been comical if the situation weren't so tragic. What do you mean? Jennifer whispered. I mean that when David died, he put this property in a trust. A trust that specifically excludes anyone who has been convicted of a felony. The true heirs are my grandchildren, Marcus's children from his first marriage. The children you made him abandon when you decided they were inconvenient to your lifestyle. Marcus's face went from white to green. That's impossible. Dad left everything to you. He left everything to me to manage, with specific instructions about what should happen if I died or became incapacitated. And one of those instructions was that the money should go to his grandchildren, not to their father if he had proven himself unworthy. The doorbell rang, and I walked calmly to answer it. Good evening, officer, I said to the policeman standing on my porch. Yes, the assault and attempted fraud are all on video. The perpetrators are in the dining room. I watched from the hallway as they handcuffed my son and his wife. Marcus kept trying to catch my eye, kept trying to say something that might fix this. But there was nothing to fix. No words that could undo what he'd done, what he'd planned to do. As they led him past me toward the door, he stopped and looked at me with tears in his eyes. Mom, he whispered, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. And for just a moment, I saw a glimpse of the little boy I'd raised, the child who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, who would make me Mother's Day cards with crayon drawings of stick figures holding hands. But that little boy was gone. Had been gone for years, probably. And I couldn't keep pretending he was still there. I'm sorry too, I said quietly. I'm sorry I failed you so completely that you grew up thinking your mother's life was worth less than her bank account. They took him away then, him and his wife, and I closed the door slowly and deliberately. The house was quiet for the first time in hours. Peaceful, even. I walked back into the dining room and began cleaning up the broken crystal, the spilled blood, the remnants of what had once been a family dinner. With each piece I picked up, I felt something lifting from my shoulders. Some weight I'd been carrying for so long I'd forgotten it was there. That was 6 months ago. The trial was swift, hard to argue with video evidence. Marcus and Jennifer both received 5-year sentences for conspiracy and assault. Marcus lost his business, his house, everything he'd built his identity around. But the story doesn't end there. Because 3 weeks after they were sentenced, I got a phone call that changed everything. Grandma rose. The voice was tentative, hopeful. It's Emma, Marcus's daughter. I heard about everything. And I was wondering, could we come visit you? Emma was 22 now, a college graduate with her father's eyes, but her mother's gentle spirit. Her brother Jake was 19, working his way through community college while supporting himself. They'd been estranged from Marcus for years, cut off when Jennifer decided that his baggage from his first marriage was holding them back. Marcus had chosen his new wife over his children, and they'd been struggling on their own ever since. Of course you can visit, I told Emma, my heart breaking for all the lost time. This is your home too. They arrived the next weekend with garbage bags full of their belongings and uncertain smiles. Emma had her grandfather's hands, I noticed immediately. Jake had Marcus's stubborn chin, but none of his selfishness. We don't want to impose, Emma said as I showed them to their rooms. We don't really have anywhere else to go. You're not imposing, I told her firmly. You're family. Real family. And slowly, carefully, we began to build something beautiful from the wreckage Marcus had left behind. Emma turned out to have inherited David's head for numbers. She took over managing the ranch's finances and discovered several investment opportunities I'd never considered. Jake had his grandfather's way with his hands. He could fix anything that broke and had a natural instinct for the kind of improvements that added real value to the property. More importantly, they both had something Marcus had lost somewhere along the way: gratitude. They appreciated everything, from home-cooked meals to clean laundry to having a safe place to sleep. They said please and thank you. They helped with dishes without being asked. They treated my home like a sanctuary, not a hotel. It took time to trust again, to open my heart to the possibility of family that wouldn't betray me. But gradually, the house filled with laughter again. Emma would practice piano in the evenings, filling the rooms with music that reminded me of happier times. Jake would work in the garden with me, learning about the plants David and I had carefully cultivated over the decades. We had Sunday dinners, but they were different now. Real conversations instead of surface small talk. Genuine interest in each other's lives instead of performative family obligations. When Emma graduated from her master's program, we celebrated with champagne and tears of joy. When Jake got accepted to transfer to a 4-year university, we all drove up to see the campus together. 6 months after Marcus went to prison, I was finally able to take that trip to Ireland I'd been dreaming about. Emma and Jake came with me, and we spent 2 weeks exploring the countryside, learning about our family history, taking thousands of pictures. Standing on the cliffs of Maher, watching the sun set over the Atlantic Ocean with my grandchildren beside me, I realized something profound. I wasn't the bitter, lonely woman Marcus had accused me of being. I was a woman who had simply been surrounded by the wrong people. The money Marcus had wanted so desperately was now funding Emma's graduate school and Jake's transfer to university. It was paying for the renovations that were turning this old ranch into a place where future generations could build memories. It was creating opportunities and security and hope. But more than that, it was teaching my grandchildren what Marcus had never learned, that family isn't about what you can take from each other. It's about what you can give. When Marcus gets out of prison in a few years, the trust will have been distributed according to David's wishes. Emma and Jake will inherit everything, not because they manipulated or threatened or demanded it, but because they loved freely and without conditions. They'll have choices Marcus never gave them. They'll have security he tried to steal from them. They'll have a future he attempted to mortgage for his own greed. And they'll have something else Marcus threw away, a family that actually functions, that supports each other, that finds joy in simple moments together. Last Sunday, as we sat around the same dining room table where Marcus struck me, Emma looked up from her plate and smiled. "I love Sunday dinners," she said simply. "Me too," Jake agreed. "It's the best part of the week." I looked around the table, at the fresh flowers Emma had picked from the garden, at the good china that finally felt precious again instead of performative, at the faces of the young people who had chosen to love me without expecting anything in return. And I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Complete, uncomplicated peace. Marcus had been wrong about me. I wasn't small or scared or bitter. I was just waiting for the right family to love. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that greed doesn't just destroy the greedy, it destroys everyone around them. Marcus didn't just lose his freedom and his money. He lost his children, his mother, his chance at real happiness. He traded everything that actually mattered for the promise of something that was never his to begin with. But sometimes, if you're very lucky, if you're very patient, love finds a way to rebuild what greed has torn down. Sometimes the family you're meant to have isn't the one you started with, it's the one you discover when you finally have the courage to let go of the one that was hurting you. Emma and Jake didn't know their grandmother before Marcus poisoned our relationship with his manipulation and demands. To them, I'm not the bitter woman who hoarded money. I'm the grandmother who opened her home and her heart when they needed it most. And maybe that's who I was all along, underneath the pain and disappointment. Maybe I just needed the right people to bring it out of me. Marcus visits sometimes. The prison allows family visits, and despite everything, he's still my son. But the conversations are stilted, awkward. He apologizes repeatedly, promises he's learned his lesson, insists he's changed. But then he'll make some comment about how lucky Emma and Jake are, how they fell into their inheritance. He still doesn't understand that love can't be demanded or manipulated or stolen. He still sees relationships as transactions instead of connections. Jennifer writes letters sometimes, always asking for money for the commissary, always promising she's found God or gotten clean or discovered the error of her ways. I don't respond to them anymore. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. But this story isn't really about them anymore. It's about the morning light streaming through clean windows, about piano music floating through rooms that ring with laughter instead of manipulation. It's about a garden tended by hands that work from love instead of obligation. It's about Sunday dinners where everyone actually wants to be there. It's about discovering that sometimes losing the family that hurts you is the only way to find the family that heals you. And as I sit here now, watching Jake help Emma with her wedding planning. Yes, she's engaged to a wonderful young man who treats her like she's precious. I realize that David was right about something. He always said that love was the only investment that guaranteed a positive return. I just wish it hadn't taken me so long to understand what he meant. Marcus wanted my money because he thought it would solve his problems. But money was never the solution to what was wrong with his life. The solution was learning to love without keeping score, to give without expecting returns, to value people for who they are instead of what they can provide. I learned that lesson the hard way, but I learned it. And now I get to watch Emma and Jake learn it the easy way, through example, through experience, through the kind of unconditional love that expects nothing but gives everything. That night when Marcus hit me was the worst night of my life. But it was also the beginning of the best chapter of my life. Because sometimes you have to lose everything to discover what was worth keeping all along. And what was worth keeping wasn't the money or the house or even the family name. What was worth keeping was the capacity to love and be loved in return. Everything else was just details. Tell me, in the comments below, would you have done what I did? Would you have had the courage to choose your own peace over your child's demands? Because I'll tell you something, it was the hardest decision I've ever made. But it was also the decision that saved my life.